We're joined by Natasha Huguet-Henchy, who is consulting actuary at NMG Benefits, who joins us for this conversation. Natasha, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Real Bokhile, and good afternoon to your listeners.
All right, let's talk about what retirement is first, and then we'll chat about what early retirement is.
Well, traditionally, retirement is when you stop working for your employer and you start living off essentially your retirement savings, that your pension or whatever you've accumulated.
So in that context, so I'm understanding me winning the Powerball, which the jackpot is 100 million, and then I decide to stop working. Does that count as early retirement?
Absolutely. That's the dream.
Okay, so we acknowledge it's not...
wake up, your coffee is cold. That's not the reality.
So when we speak about the context, so we know we're not necessarily referring to people who are multimillionaires and then say, I'm retiring, and then they just sit as a chairperson. We're not referring to the person who's just won a whole lot of money and decides to just travel for funsies. We're referring to people who have been putting away money every month and look forward to receiving something in bulk.
Yes. Well, yes. So look, the idea is obviously we all dream about the idea of something in bulk. But the problem is that most of us work in jobs where we're accustomed to having a regular income at the end of the month. So if we get this big lump sum in bulk, we often don't necessarily know what to do with it, and we perhaps might make the wrong decisions. And also, if you take your lump sum in bulk in cash, you're going to pay tax. So the first thing is really around understanding that it's much better to have an income for life that is guaranteed, and that check's going to arrive every month at the end of the month when you're going to need it. And so rather focus on your retirement income than your retirement lump sum. And the key is really how that lump sum translates into the income over time.
I want to know your view on something, Natasha. I have a friend who passed away about 2 or 3 years ago, and she did not believe in the concept of, putting away for pension and retirements. Now, the context matters. Of course, she was a businesswoman, and she always felt that money should be useful and not sitting far away. To the average person or anybody in general, why is it still an important thing? Because one might feel like I'm putting away money and can barely afford my life, hence things like two-pot system, for money I can't access till I'm 65.
So, yes, and your friend example is different because she was using that capital to build a business, and that business, the sale of that business, ultimately would be what would give her retirement income.
Yes.
Most of us are not, so that capital, if we're not going to use it, and we're not investment experts. So it's much better to, and it's a kind of a little bit about paying yourself. Just put that money away, take it off your salary first thing, and it is going to be there. We are living longer. And we don't have that luxury of, when your grandpa retired, or if he was retired early, he had this guaranteed pension from his company. It was paid for life. He didn't have to worry about it.
Yes.
Times are different. It's your responsibility. You need to make sure that you've got retirement savings. Yes, you might be lucky enough to have something from your company, but that's almost 99% sure not going to be enough. And you're going to need to have something else on the side.
So let's come back to what you were saying about the focus is building a little pot that will basically sustain you monthly. So what is normal retirement before we talk about what early retirement is?
So there is no statutory retirement age in South Africa. You normally, if you're employed, your retirement age is governed by your employment contract. So there is the South African government does offer a state old age pension, which is payable when you reach age 65, but that's not retirement age. So you can retire at any time that you want to. What the laws in South Africa will allow you to you have to be older than 55 essentially. So if you're older than 55, if you take your pension in the form of a retirement benefit, you can then get the favorable tax treatment that is available in terms of our tax structure.
And I'm glad you said we don't really have a prescriptive retirement age, because our parliament and, cabinet is like, 60s and up.
Yes.
So you're actually youth if you're 60 in our government.
Yes. But, you also need to remember that retirement ages of 65 were set in the days when people lived to 66 or 67, So now we retire at 65 and we live to 85, So it's a very different ball game. And early retirement is the dream completely. I'd love to stop working when I hit 55. But the problem is, if I'm going to live to 85, then it means I'm going to have to live off my income or my whatever I've got accumulated for 30 years. Whereas if I delay till 65, then I've only got to live off that money for 20 years. And I get the plus that I've got an extra 10 years of savings and growth. So that kind of creates a virtual circle, So the longer you can delay your retirement, the better, much as we all want the dream of going off early and sailing our yachts around the Caribbean.
So let's then create this hypothetical scenario of a person who is working and the company they work for is already doing some kind of pension fund for them, but maybe they are also saying to themselves, I'm going to put away a little bit more, and their goal, I'm going to use something extreme, is to retire at 50. And this average person is 30 years old. Now, for that to be attainable and achievable, what are some of the questions the person has to ask themselves?
So they need to ask themselves if they're putting away enough. So the rule of thumb that we look at is, if you are retiring at 60, between 60 and 65, you need around, let's call it 15 times your salary as a lump sum to stay in your pensions. In other words, if your salary is 100,000 rand, then you're going to need 1.5 million. That's right, yeah, 15 times that, to sustain 100,000 rand income. But if you are 50, then that multiple is not 15 times; it's closer to 25 times, 22 times, 20 times. So you've got to have built a much higher pot to go earlier, because it's got to last you for longer. And which means that your contribution, so we say if you contribute 15% of salary for 40 years, that should give you that right target that I mentioned. So,
and you touched on the 15%.
You have to start with saving at 10.
Yeah, oh my God. So the 15%, just so we are following you, and we're using an easy round figure like 100,000 rand, so that it's easy to calculate. So if you're earning 100,000 rand a month and you are looking at the 15%, or let's make it more realistic, 10,000 rand a month, and you should be, is what you're saying, putting away 1,500 rand a month.
That's right.
Towards your retirement.
That's right. For 40 years.
Okay. Help us with the psychological part, Natasha. I mean, I work in an industry where you have to do it for yourself. So there is no company, what do they call it? Group something for workers like myself. And it is something that I'm fortunate, when I had a financial advisor, started being like, you have to start. You have to start. Now, liquidity in my industry is gold. Share with us and remind us why it's important to not wait for a company or anyone to force you to put it away.
So the problem is that the longer you wait, the more you have to put in. So we said 15% for 40 years. It's not 30% for 20 years. It actually gets more and more, because that first 100 rand that you save is the most important 100 rand, because that's going to have grown and compounded for 40 years. If you only start when you're 20, you need much, much higher contributions, to be able to afford it. So it just gets exponentially more expensive. And the advice I can give really is to start your saving as soon as you can when you're young, and pump it when you're young. before the kids arrive, before you've got mortgage bonds and whatever. And then if needs be, when you're going through the tough times and school fees and, cars that are breaking down and whatever, you can cut it back for a little bit while you're kind of in your 30s and 40s. And then as the kids start to leave home in your 50s, you then pump it again. So balance your needs, but just make sure that you don't dip into that first lot of savings that you did when you were in your 20s, because just leave it there because it's working for you while you're not even thinking about it. It's just growing, and the compound investment, the markets do grow. Yes, we've had dramas with Iranian wars and all sorts of things now, and the markets are turbulent, but we will live through the cycle. We lived through COVID. We've lived through all of them. It will come back up, and, the long-term growth and the compounding effect is the really key thing there.
There is a message here that says, yes, Rebkhile, you can retire anytime from age 55. You can retire from a retirement annuity while still employed and or working full time. Would you encourage this, Natasha, or discourage that?
I would definitely discourage you from taking your retirement annuity if you are still working. If you are able to continue to afford to put additional funds into that retirement annuity, yes, you can get it at 55, and again, it feels like a bit like a two-pot amount, but don't. Leave it there. Continue to invest. There's no once you've kind of hit 55, there becomes no minimum. You can roll it on a yearly basis, depending on the T's and C's of your particular service provider. But just roll it over and take it. It just that extra, if you can leave it till 65, that extra 10 years of growth and the extra contributions that you continue to put in there will make the world of difference at retirement. Whereas if you take it now, I've got a friend and she said, she's getting $400 a month. It wasn't worth it. I said, but, why did you take it? If you just, continue to save, you would have had 4,000 at retirement. Maybe that's an extreme, but, whatever. It's just, keep it there.
Can you share with us what the basic principles are? And I know that there are online calculators. A person can go online and sort of do how much should I save to be living at this level in this year at my retirement. But give us the basic principles of what we look at, because we do, of course, consider inflation. So let's use our hypothetical 10,000 Rand earning 30-year-old who wants to retire at 50. What are the things that they should be asking themselves about their retirement age? Like, what would the lifestyle look like? Because maybe we don't think about that part. And we see many people when they retire, they downsize.
Yes. So certainly you do have, if you've invested in an asset like property, which you can use to downsize, then that is a key thing. You then can sell your big house and move to a smaller place and release some equity from that house to be able to fund your lifestyle. But the key thing you need to remember is that your medical expenses go up significantly when you are in retirement, and you really can't underestimate those costs. And medical inflation, if any of you are on the medical aid, the inflation of the medical aid is 7, 8, 9%, while all of us are getting 3 or 4% salary increases. So it's not, and the same thing happens if your medical aid is continuing to do that in retirement, and you're living off a level income. How are you going to afford that? So you really need to make sure that you've got enough set aside.
And I'm glad you bring that up, because if a person has not started medical aid, the older you get, the more expensive it becomes to join with the waiting blah periods and all those things.
So they put those waiting periods and limits on your either load your premiums or put waitings on you so that you can't join immediately.
In terms of now the other considerations around lifestyle, because funny enough, I was not even thinking about medical aid, and I'm like, oh my gosh, medical aid. What are some of the other things that a person needs to consider? Not many people, as we know, own a property, but even if you do, it's not like you're living there for free.
No, completely. No. So, your rates and taxes are still there. So the way I need to think is you need to have enough guaranteed income to cover your living expenses. So be that your rental, your medical, your food, your tax, your transport. Those are your kind of key. So let's just make sure that you've got enough income to cover those expenses. And then if you've got money above that, then that's the dream. That then can afford you the holidays and the fun life thereafter. But you need to make sure that you've got that income secured, at retirement. Capital secured income.
Yes. What if, Natasha, my retirement plan is my son?
Yeah, well then, good luck. You just hope that he loves you more than his wife.
Oh my God! I love that. Okay, now to come back to the part of and we've got some voice notes coming through on 072 702 and 702. I want to go to the listeners' questions and comments, and then we get your thoughts.
Hello. As far as I understand, the state pension is from 60 years old. Thanks. Bye.
This is so depressing. I mean, I'm 55 this year. Don't have much saved. No future. I'll be living in a gutter in my old age. Well, I won't make it there. That's for sure.
Who sent that voice note? Natasha, I'm sorry.
Shane, that's us.
He says, oh my God. Okay, we're laughing at the reality check, right? So before we play the last voice note, Natasha, what would you like to respond to the 55-year-old who might be listening saying, I don't actually have much saved, and I don't want anybody to lose hope, but what can they do now that they're like, okay, I don't want to live in a gutter? What can they do at this late stage in the game other than try to work until they're 98?
Yeah, so it's funny enough. I was watching a podcast before I came on, and I can live to 97 and survive comfortably for 17 minutes or something. So, so that's not the plan. So I think there's two things. The one is that it's very hard to go from living off 10,000 a month to living off 2,000 a month. So that's a big jump. And people say, but I can't afford to save. And then my answer is, well, could you afford to drop from 9,000 to 9,500? Could you cut 500 Rand from your expenses?
Yes.
Because it's easier to do that than to suddenly cut 8,000 Rand from your expenses or 5,000, So just think a little bit about that sacrifice and what can you do to increase your savings. That's the first thing. So, so think about that big drop in income and the sacrifice of rather saving. The other thing around investing in retirement funds is that the government helps you. So the government gives us very good tax deductions for putting contributions into our retirement savings. So depending on your tax rate, but let's say you're at kind of an average 31 or 36% or whatever. If you're at the 31% tax rate, if you put in 100 Rand, the government will give you back 31 Rand at the end of the tax year for every 100 Rand that you put in, which means that you actually only are putting in 69 Rand. And you need to bear that. So the government is subsidizing your retirement saving by your tax rate.
Yeah.
So, use that as a vehicle rather than people say, oh, well, I'll rather put it in the bank or whatever. No, because if you put it in the bank, the government's just going to tax the interest. So use the saving, the tax efficiency that the government has constructed
Yes.
To do that. And then the other thing I'm going to say is that we are living in a time where it's not really feasible. Most of us are fit and healthy and able to work and able to do something at 65. I mean, I look at my own mother. She's 80. She's still quite, on the go. And we need to think a little bit about retiring with a why. So put on your new tackies, put some new tire treads on, and start a new career. So take whatever capital you've got out that comes out of your retirement fund. Speak to a financial planner. NMG has a lot of financial planners available. Talk to somebody and see about maybe you start a new career. You invest that into a franchise business or something.
Can I take a quick, very important voice note, Natasha, because I think it's so relevant before we go to the news.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Relebohile. Beautiful topic there about retirement. So my son is 14 years old. I've been thinking of taking out a retirement fund for him. My daughter is 25. Like put away like 300 rands a month. I think that's the minimum investment amount.
In 800 meters, continue straight to stay on N12 Southern Bypass, N12.
Will 300 rands per month be sufficient for a 14-year-old now, just in case they don't get a job at 55?
All right. So what I'm going to ask Natasha, if you can stay with us while we quickly go to the news, because I think this is such an important question being asked. How do you start any kind of retirement fund for your children? What is the calculation? We will be heading to the car feature, but before that, we will finish up our conversation on early retirement, take the remainder of your messages. And now it's time for the news. And we are wrapping up our conversation on early retirement. So the question, Natasha, and thank you so much for staying with us. The question was simply, what should I do for my 14-year-old child? But maybe you can give general advice to parents who are like, we are seeing it all. How do we start preparing for our own children's retirement fund? Which actually for me in my brain is quite trippy, because it's almost like you're setting you're putting out to the universe that your child's going to be a workhorse till they're 65. Oh my gosh.
So mostly I think it's not so much around getting your children set up for retirement. I think what you need to do is make sure that your children are funded for their education, and they can then set up their own retirement annuity. But I think that the key is if you need to set up a retirement fund, you need to do your market research. You need to chat to a financial planner. There are some minimums around, and some companies you can go and just get something online. The easiest and one of the quick ones as well is to find a retirement a savings account, the tax-free savings account. Speak to your bank. Obviously, speak to NMG. We'd love to help you. We've got a great product that has got very no minimums, low fees. So just look for you want something where you're going to pay get the best value for money. So shop around, do your homework.
Somebody was saying to avoid rates and taxes, you must just move back to Limpopo, KZN, or Eastern Cape rurals.
Absolutely.
Right? And live off grid.
Live off grid. Well, then the problem is you need the capital to get your water tanks and your solar in, but absolutely.
And then I'm going to close off on this message that says, retirement for me is not rosy, because you have your money sitting somewhere while you live as a pauper. Thoughts on that, Natasha?
It's always such a difficult one. It really is such a difficult one. And as I said, the problem is the only income you're going to get from the state is the 2,500 or 2,000 rand a month. So if you think you can live on that, then that's fine. But if you don't, you need to then say, well, look, I'm sitting here, I am living off some income. I need to supplement so that I can smooth my income over life, because I can't, that big drop is just going to be huge. And yes, you might be lucky enough, your children might support you, your grandchildren might support you, but you can't bank on that. So spending on your children's education, absolutely, they will support you. But they might not be able to support you fully.
Also, them being able to support you being educated and them not liking you is a whole different conversation altogether. They might just be like, you're a terrible person. I'm keeping it moving. But I get you completely, Natasha, and I think we will be chatting again and having this conversation in our series on retirement. Thank you so much for your time.